On past experience, I think we could all have predicted that Mr Prescott's message to us today was going to be pretty direct. I'd say that was refreshing to the point of being breathtaking. Mr Prescott, thank you very much.
At the moment, just 25% of onshore wind farm planning applications are being green-lit by local authorities, something the Tory Shadow Energy Minister said had to change.
I think one of the problems we face too often in energy policy is we have targets, but we don't have a clear delivery mechanism. Everybody knows where we want to go to, but nobody knows whose job it is to get us there. There isn't any way of saying, in this month, who should have done what, and whose responsibility is to put it right if it doesn't happen. And that's been part of the culture across energy policy. We've got it in carbon capture and storage development. We've got it in fuel poverty. We've got it in gas storage. In fact, the only area where there is a roadmap is in nuclear policy. And I think that's right. There should be a roadmap for nuclear policy. But if we want the industry in other areas to move forward, then we've got to have that clarity of purpose in every other sector of energy policy as well. Because otherwise, the cast-iron rule of these targets is that they won't be met, and it'll be left to some poor politician coming along in 10 years' time to explain that they can't be met, but the way in which they then do it is simply to morph it into something which sounds more ambitious in another 10 years' time, rather than admitting that the policy has failed. So one of the priorities for an incoming Conservative government would be to say that where we have targets, we need to have a roadmap as well. We need to know who is responsible for delivering the change and when it's going to happen by. But sometimes as well, we think that the government's approach to trying to drive change doesn't actually fit in with the culture of the way in which we do things in this country. I was concerned by Ed Miliband's comments recently, where he said that people had no option but to accept renewables and likened those who oppose some projects to people who don't stop at zebra crossing. To say to people that this is your duty, you must do it, is not the way to win people on side. There needs to be a much more constructive engagement with people, so we win the battle of ideas rather than try and do it in a top-down approach. In dear Liberal Holland, where they decided to introduce smart meters by law, and they said everybody will have a smart meter and you will go to prison if you don't. And the whole of Holland rose up and said, you don't talk to us like that. And the government turned around and said, all right, then have one if you like. And they've been rather more successful by a policy of persuasion than they were by saying, you're going to have to do this. And if we want people to accept change, then that's exactly what it needs to mean. They have to accept change, they have to buy into the idea of what's involved. And so the approach which we would take is not to coerce communities, but to make sure that communities feel that they are part of this process. We are absolutely committed to the principle of localism. And anybody in the shadow team, when discussing policy with David Cameron or Oliver Letwin, and their first question is, does this tie in with our localist agenda? Because there is a really genuine determination to delegate power and authority to levels closer to communities, levels closer to people. And that applies to business policy, to health, to education, and to planning issues as well. And so the policy for us on most of these issues is that we would be giving councils more authority, but we would be expecting them to accept more responsibility for their decisions as well. Because I think too often we find that it's easy for local authorities to decline an application in the knowledge that that then decision will be delegated upwards to the planning inspectorate, and therefore it may happen in the end that a great deal of extra time is taken, and we actually want to resolve it at the community level. We want people who are the elected local representatives to feel that they are genuinely making the decisions about the future direction of their communities.
The best laid plans of any party can always be derailed when Ken Clarke is counted in their number. Earlier in the week he had told the Financial Times that interest in renewable energy was a passing fad, something Mr Hendry was pressed to explain.
Okay, perhaps I can just read what Ken said afterwards. He said, I was expressing an off-the-cuff view as a layman and not as a party spokesman on the subject. There is no change in Conservative Party policy. And Greg Clark said, we actively support getting more of our energy from renewable sources, including both onshore and offshore wind. This will help tackle climate change, create thousands of jobs, and help guarantee our energy security. Britain has some of the best renewable resources in the world, not just on land, but in the wind, wave and tidal power available off one of the longest coastlines of Europe. We should make the most of those resources. So that this position from Greg Clark is the formal position and the position from his namesake was the off-the-cuff position.
Establishing what is Conservative energy policy